Hi everyone, this is Kathleen. Welcome to this week's career lesson. Today we are going to be talking about researching companies and networking within the companies that you research as part of your job search. Now, this might sound a little bit intuitive, at least the first half of it. You all know how to do a Google search. You all know how to go to a company website to learn more about it. But the reason that we're talking about it today is because job searching can be really overwhelming. There are possibly thousands of companies that you could work at in your local area and or be willing to relocate to. And by knowing how to target your search and be really efficient in your search, you can use your time as productively as possible. So you can spend more time doing things like networking at those companies, preparing for interviews, actually filling out job applications, which tends to feel a lot more productive and rewarding when you're searching than if you're just spending all of your time reading about companies, trying to find places to apply, trying to identify jobs, or just sending your resume off to every single job and every single company that you can find. You definitely want to cast your net wide, but by being focused in your search, it can actually be a lot more productive and feel a lot more rewarding to go through the job search process as a candidate. So let's dive in. I'm going to share my screen. And let's talk about researching companies. So the goals for today is for you to leave the lesson knowing how to narrow down your job search by researching companies that you are interested in working for, and then being able to identify people who work at those companies who can help you build your network and leverage the contacts that you already have in your personal and professional network to meet people who are in the next circle of your professional network and even outside of that, cold connections. And all of these can help you get a foot in the door at a company where you're interested in working. So first things first, researching companies. A lot of times I've worked with a lot of job searchers and a lot of people transitioning in their career. And one of the things that I hear most often from people who are starting out in the field, when I ask them, all right, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? What specific fields do you want to work in? What types of companies? How many people do you want to work there? What type of team do you want to work on? A lot of people say to me, I don't know. I don't care. I just want to get a job and get my foot in the door and start building skills and not have a horrible manager. And I don't really care what type of company I work at beyond that. And I appreciate that because it's good to be open. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into one tiny little area and then miss out on other opportunities where you could be really happy and a great fit. But if you are not being at all focused in your job search, then it can feel like a really unproductive use of your time. And if you target your job search, then you can maximize the energy that you spend on a few key areas. And in general, those key areas where you want to focus your time are the companies that you're most passionate about, or the fields that you're most passionate about, and the areas where you have connections and therefore have the highest potential of getting a job. So let's talk more about that. Your energy, I would say, in terms of searching, not actually applying or interviewing, but just in terms of searching for jobs, I would say 90% of your job searching energy should be focused on finding jobs at companies that you're passionate about and companies where you have warm connections. And this will really help you narrow down your search and target it so you're using your time efficiently and productively. So to start out, I recommend make a list of everything that you care about and anything that you're passionate about or feel really connected to or are interested in or you think is cool. It doesn't have to be a moral thing. It could just be an interest. So for me, when I search, I'm really passionate about education. So that's always the backbone of my job search when I'm ready to take the next step in my career. For you, it could be healthcare, or it could be animals, or it could be gaming. It doesn't really matter. Think of the things that you're interested in and excited about and list them out. Once you have that list, just run a quick Google search. You can do something like gaming companies near me or healthcare companies near me and see what comes up. And this can be a really good starting point, and you might discover some companies who are doing awesome things that you're excited about that are also near you or in an area where you would want to work. And for those of you who maybe don't really feel that connected to companies based on what they do or their values or their mission, that is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting to just work for a paycheck and have a happy day to day where you feel challenged in your job and you have a good manager, but you don't necessarily feel deeply connected to the work that you're doing. That's totally fine. Some ways that you can narrow down your job search is by looking at companies within a specific mile radius of your house if having a short commute is important to you. Or if there's certain benefits or salaries that you're looking for that are important for you to have in order to meet your personal needs, you can filter by that. The latter two here might be a little trickier to filter by, but some job sites like Stack Overflow actually have options where they allow you to filter by benefits, by salary, or by other perks like relocation, visa sponsorship, etc. And once you have your list, follow every single company on LinkedIn and social media. And the reason you need to do this is because companies will post things on LinkedIn and on social media before they get posted publicly on the website. Or this is especially true for jobs. Jobs will be posted on the company's LinkedIn page before they're actually showing up on LinkedIn's job board, and sometimes even on the company website. So you'll get premier access to information and updates by following companies that you wouldn't get otherwise. Another reason to do this is it just makes it a lot easier to keep on top of all of the companies that you're interested in. It's a lot easier to devote 20 minutes or so every day to just scrolling through your LinkedIn or your social media feeds and seeing what has been posted in the past 24 hours than it is to go through every single individual company website and try to find information that way. So it's efficient to follow them, and it also gives you access to awesome information you wouldn't otherwise have access to. And then again, this is not always going to be a super quick process. It is going to spend, you are going to spend hours of time researching companies, learning about them, trying to find people who work there. And that's inevitable unless you get really, really lucky and you just happen to find your dream company on the first Google search. Chances are you're going to spend a lot of time doing this. And by starting the process now, the more time you can focus later on things like interviewing, continuing to build your network, preparing for negotiations, building your portfolio, and the stuff that you'll want to be spending the time on later. So I really recommend spending at least a couple hours every week, at night, on the weekends. I know we want you to have your breaks on the weekend, but job searching a lot of times can take more time than is currently allocated in the Lambda School schedule. And if you're putting in that extra time now, you are going to thank yourself later because you will be saving that time later on in the schedule. So once you have this list of companies, which will continue to grow, but as you build that list, once you have targets for your job search, how do you get a foot in the door there? What if you don't know anybody there? You can just apply. I would not recommend doing this. Sometimes if you're applying to companies, you could be going up against dozens, hundreds, sometimes even over 1,000 candidates for one role. And the competitiveness will really depend on what type of company it is, how well established it is, how much other people want to work there. I remember learning that Google gets, I think, over 10,000 job applications every single day. They're a big company, they hire a lot of people, but that is insanely competitive. So when you're applying to companies that are really in demand among candidates, then you need to do something to stand out. And the best way to do that, hands down, is to network and to have somebody on the inside who can advocate for you and push for you in a way that you can't do through the generic application portal. So the best way to meet people, to find people, to stay in touch with people, to do this is LinkedIn. And the reason that LinkedIn is the best for this is because everything on LinkedIn is centered around your connections, who you know. And so anytime you search for a job or search for a company, LinkedIn will always make it really easy to see who you know there. So here are two screenshots. I just searched for the Lambda School page on LinkedIn, And I can see right here that Tom and 7 other of my connections work here. Now, 7 of those connections I got after I started working at Lambda School, but Tom's actually somebody that I've known for years before I had even heard of Lambda School. And so if I looked up Lambda School just in an initial search, which I did when I was job searching, I would have seen I already know somebody who works here. This is a company that I want to spend extra time looking into because chances are I can at least get an interview because I know Tom pretty well. And then the same thing goes when you're actually searching for jobs. So on the right side here, I typed in program manager in San Jose, California. And you can see at the top that there are over 6,000 results. I am not going to apply for all 6,000 jobs. I'm also definitely not qualified for all 6,000 jobs. But I can see here, LinkedIn tells me that I know 9 people who work at Apple, 8 people at LinkedIn, 4 at Colabora, and 3 at PayPal. And if I were to scroll down further in the list, I would start seeing jobs at companies where I don't know anybody. But I know that all of these companies hire for program managers. I'm probably not going to be a good fit for a Mac system engineering program manager. That's just not my skill set and background. But it's good for me to know that I have 9 connections at Apple. And so if I find other jobs at Apple that I would be a good fit for, then I have people there who can probably advocate for me or at least put in a good word. So I'm definitely going to want to keep track of Apple as a company to keep an eye on. And for those of you who have spent any time on LinkedIn at all, which most of you hopefully have, and for those of you who haven't, if you don't have a LinkedIn, as soon as this lesson is over, I want you to immediately go to linkedin.com and make a LinkedIn. You need to have a LinkedIn. It is super critical for your search. It is your best friend. It will help you find people. It will save you so much time and effort. And people need to be able to find you to connect with you also. Recruiters will reach out to you. So make sure you have a LinkedIn. And if you have spent time there, you have seen that LinkedIn has 3 tiers of connections: first, second, and third. Your first degree connections are your warm contacts. These are people whom you are directly connected to. And these are also the people whom you're going to want to look at when you're trying to figure out what companies to research. So the places where you have first degree connections, those companies should all make it onto your shortlist. And that's not to say that you should apply to jobs at every single one of those companies or want to work at every single one of those companies. But if you want to target your research and make it super efficient, starting with the companies where you know people is a great way to do that. And then you can whittle it down from there. And you might be more interested in some than others. That's totally okay. But start here because you have a foot in the door already by knowing people at these companies. Your second degree connections are your, I call them cool connections. And they're people whom you're connected to through your first degree connections. And this is where LinkedIn becomes really, really powerful because let's say that you have 100 first degree connections and each of your 100 first degree connections also has 100 first degree connections. Your network goes from 100 first degree connections to 10,000 second degree connections, just like that. And so those are 10,000 people whom you could get an introduction to through your first degree connections. And so it's really important also to look at companies when you're job searching where you have second degree connections, because you might be able to get an introduction to that person through one of your first degree connections. And then finally, third degree connections are your cold contacts. These are people who you're either really indirectly connected to through a second degree connection, or you just have no direct connection to them whatsoever. And these are not people that you want to write off. You still want to consider your third degree connections as people to potentially reach out to and ask for help with and try to make into first degree connections. But it's going to take a little bit more effort and a different approach than your first degree connections. Before we move on, I do want to acknowledge that a lot of people have first degree connections on LinkedIn that are not actually people whom you know. So if I go back here, I see my 9 connections at Apple. I know for a fact that about half of those are people that I definitely know. I can think off the top of my head of a few people I know I've met with multiple times in real life who work at Apple. I am guessing that about half of those are people whom I've either never met directly in person or talked to in person, and one of us just sent the other a random connection request on LinkedIn. Or maybe I met them once really quickly in passing at some event or through a friend or something like that. So I'm going to treat those 4 or 5 people whom I know really well differently than I treat the 4 or 5 people whom I don't really know at all. And so first degree connections are powerful only insofar as they're actually first degree connections outside of LinkedIn. So when you're starting out in your career, and I did this, most people do this, you just want to build your network as quickly as possible. And it's good for you because as you get more connections, you show up in more recruiter searches, you get like a little bit more LinkedIn cred, the more connections that you have. And now I'm at a point in my career where I'm actually finding that it's working against me because it makes it really hard. I probably have more of these wishy-washy first degree connections than actual real first degree connections whom I would feel comfortable reaching out to ask for an introduction to somebody in their network. And so that's just something to consider as you build out your LinkedIn network. It can really work in your favor early on and then be a pain later on. So I wouldn't discourage you from freely accepting any invitations that you get or sending them to people whom you would like to meet or get to know. But just be aware that, a first degree connection does not guarantee that you have a close relationship with that person. So let's say you're searching for a job, you don't have any first degree connections, you don't have any second degree connections, and you still want to find somebody who works at that company. You always want to try to find somebody who works at a company that you're applying to. You never just want to completely apply cold and not have any sort of contact with anybody there prior. Your chances of getting a call back really increase if you have some type of contact with somebody at the company. So how do you do that when you know that you don't have anybody in your first or second degree connections? So go on LinkedIn, type in the title of the job or a common job title in the field that you're applying to and the name of the company. So in this example here, I typed in UX design Microsoft. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find people who work in UX design at Microsoft. And then below that, you want to filter for your region, unless you're open to relocating, in which case you don't need to filter for this. And you want to make sure that their current company is set to the company that you're looking for. And this will help you narrow down your list of people who are in the field that you're interested in and who are in an area where they're accessible to you. So you can meet them for coffee, or it might just be easier to connect with somebody who lives in your same geographical area. So I can see here, looking through this list, Microsoft is based in Seattle, so it makes sense that pretty much everybody here would show up in Seattle. I haven't yet applied to the filter for location, but I see right at the top, this Han Shen Chen is showing up as a UX design lead based in the Bay Area, which is where I live. So he might be somebody I want to reach out to. And I can see that we have a shared connection, and I'm looking at that person's name right now, and I just know that I have never met her in real life. And one of us sent a connection request to the other, but I do not have a relationship with this person directly anyway. Again, maybe I met them in passing at one event, but I cannot reach out to Nikita and ask her for an introduction to Han Shen, unfortunately. So he would be what I would consider somebody I would reach out to cold, even though technically by LinkedIn definitions, he's a second degree connection. And another good thing to do whenever possible, and I'm going to go through this live with you all in just a few minutes as we go through a tutorial, but try to aim for people with whom you share some common experiences or interests. And just knowing how to appeal to people on a more personal level can really increase the odds of you getting a reply back. You might have found, if you've tried this in the past, that a lot of the cold outreach you do, nobody ends up responding to your messages, which is really frustrating and disappointing. It happens. Don't let it deter you. And a good way to work around this is whenever possible, just find those shared things in common that you can connect with the person on outside of just the professional. So let's dive into what this looks like right now. So first things first, before I'm going to search for anything on LinkedIn, I want to find companies that I'm interested in working at. And let's pretend, for purposes of this conversation, that I live in Arkansas, near Little Rock. And so what I'm going to do is, because I'm not super connected to any one field or type of job or like a mission-driven company or anything like that, I don't really know where to begin. So I'm just going to type in best companies to work for in Little Rock, Arkansas, and see what comes up. So I see here flexjobs.com, and this has remote, part-time, and freelance jobs. That could be kind of cool. And maybe there isn't a really strong tech economy where I live, so this could be a really good place for me to start my research. So I'm scrolling down, and I can see a bunch of companies that are headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. And so what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to go into Hunter, which, if you haven't set up a Hunter profile yet, there will be a link and training kit for you to do that. It's a great way to track your job research. I also have a spreadsheet that I will share with all of you if you prefer to do it in Google Sheets. And this is a strategy that I was using before I knew about Hunter that worked really well for me. So it's up to you. The important thing is to just track it. It doesn't really matter how you track it, as long as you have some place where you're organizing your research. So I can see here, I'm going to pull this out of the way. So let's see, ABC Financial. I don't know anything about this company, but I'm going to add it to my Hunter board. And then there's a Walmart headquarters near there. So I'm going to add that. I know that they hire a lot of people, so that's a good one to know about. Windstream. Also, have never heard of Windstream, but I'm going to add it to my list anyway. I think that was the right one. Might have to make sure that that's the right Windstream. I'm going to assume it is and then come back to it later. And then I saw one here, Heifer International. I think I've heard of this one. And I actually think that I know a couple people who used to volunteer with Heifer International. So that might be a company that I want to focus, or an organization rather, that I want to focus on. Great. And so from there, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start researching these companies. And you want to do this in depth. You want to go through the rest of the list and see what else shows up. But these are appearing on a flexible job site, and that's something that I'm really interested in right now. So I'm going to want to focus my energy on these. So let's see, Heifer International. What can I learn about Heifer International? I know it's a nonprofit. Know it's about ending hunger, but I don't really know much about how they do it. So from here, I would just go into their About page, read all about what they do, start learning about it. And if this is something that appeals to me, that I feel really excited about, and I'm like, yeah, I could see myself working here. I share a lot of these values. I didn't really know that this was what I was looking for, but I'm excited about this. Then I would want to go to their careers and see what job opportunities do they have. And then filter, I can see they have an administrative assistant role. Let's say I'm looking for a UX design role or some type of design role. So that's not really going to work for me. Farm technician, that's probably not going to work for me either. Knowledge and sharing manager. I don't know if they have any jobs for me right now, but I know that this is a company that I'm really excited about and that I want to stay on top of. So from there, I'm going to go to LinkedIn. And I'm going to make sure that I follow Heifer International. And that way, when they do post jobs that might be a fit for me, I will be notified of that in my LinkedIn feed. And if I'm checking my LinkedIn regularly, then that's going to pop up and I'm going to see that right away. So that's just one way that you can go about starting your job in company research. I recommend going into a little bit more depth than we just did here, but that's to give you an idea about where to start, what to do. From there, I would probably try to find examples of Heifer International in the news. Or I would look at people who work here and see, do I know anyone? It doesn't look like I do, but what types of jobs do they have? Does this look like a company where they would hire a UX designer, or is that not something that they're really focused on because they're a nonprofit? Maybe they don't have the budget to hire somebody who's specifically devoted to that. So these are things you want to consider as you're going through your job search. And it might turn out that that is not a viable company, and in which case I would just delete it and focus on the other companies that I found in my initial research and go from there. So once you have found a company and you've started targeting the company that you want to work for, what you can do from there is try to find people who work there. So let's say I'm applying to my job as a program manager at Lambda School. So what I would do is I would just type in program manager, Lambda School, enter, and see what comes up. And I'm going to look through this list, pretend that my name isn't here for purposes of this demonstration. And again, it shows me here whom I have connections with. And when I see Brittany's name right here, I can see that she's connected to Tom Mannion. And he's the person who showed up, whom I knew before I worked at Lambda, who also showed up on the Lambda website. So she's somebody that I might want to look into a little bit more. So I don't know this person, but I can see she's based in the Bay Area like me. That's great. And then, so I go to her LinkedIn profile and I see that she also used to work at Facebook and Uber. And I realize that's probably how she knows Tom, because he used to work at Uber. And so I start looking through her profile and I see that she was on the community operations team. I also happen to know somebody who worked on the community operations team at Uber in New York City. So this is somebody that I might have another connection with that I don't even realize. So I could text the person that I know who worked in community operations and say, hey, do you happen to know somebody who named Brittany Moss who worked in community operations at Uber in New York? And she would get back to me and say, yes, I actually do, and might be able to give me some tips or at least give me a name so that when I connect with Brittany, I could say, hey, I think that we have a shared connection. I see that you're a program manager at Lambda School. I'm really interested in the Career and Professional Development Program Manager role. I'd love to talk with you more about your experience. And so since I don't have LinkedIn Premium, I can't message her, but what I can do is connect with her and then add a note and say, pleasure to meet you. I see we have a couple shared connections. I'm really excited about a PM role at Lambda School. You need to be careful here because you have a pretty short character limit. I'd love to learn more about your experience at LS. Would you be open to grabbing coffee in the next couple of weeks? Thanks, Kathleen. And then I would send that invitation and she would get that note with my invitation to connect. So another way to go about this when you don't have shared connections, if I scroll down a little bit more, I see that somebody at Lambda School is based in Boston. So FIWA is based in Boston. I'm from Boston originally. And so even though, when I look at our connections, I don't have anybody in there whom I know really, really, really well. What we have in common is that Boston connection. And so he's somebody that I might want to reach out to just to say, hey, you're from Boston. I'm from Boston. I'm really interested in Lambda School. Would love to talk to you more and learn more about your experience working there, et cetera, et cetera. And then as I scroll down through his profile more, I see he volunteered with Boston City Council. A million years ago, I interned with Boston City Council. So that's just another connection that we have. So this is to show you some of the ways that you can go about finding people whom you aren't connected to directly and sending cold outreach messages, identifying people whom you have little things in common with, just to make that outreach feel a little bit more friendly and personal. And sometimes you'll be in a situation where you don't know anybody at all, and you are trying to reach out to people cold, make any connection, any inroad possible. That's okay. You might not hear back from people, but it's worth a try. So if you can't find somebody whom you have that shared connection or another shared interest or shared experience with, whom you can connect with on a more personal level, don't hesitate to send a cold outreach email. It is completely professional to ask to talk to somebody, to ask to learn more about what they do at the company and share your interest and your passion in what they do. The worst that will happen is somebody just won't reply. But the best thing that could happen is you get your foot in the door at a company that you're really interested and excited about working at. So for Friday, go back to sharing my screen with you. Your task for Friday is to find at least 10 companies that match your priorities and add them either to Hunter or to another job tracker that you use that works well for you. And do some initial research about the company, what they do, why you're interested in working there, what's exciting about what's happening in their recent history or near future. And then you want to follow all of them on LinkedIn and social media. And if you do not have a LinkedIn, part of your assignment for Friday is to create a LinkedIn profile and start filling it out. And then share your Hunter board with your PM for Friday. And then the second part of your assignment is to take it one step farther by sending outreach messages to 5 people who work at those companies. Or if you have a connection to someone there through another person in your network, ask for an introduction. So do this with at least 5 people. Either send a cold message or a message to somebody you don't know through a warm contact to get the ball rolling and to get an introduction happening. And then send copies of your emails to your PM as part of your Friday submission. I have some outreach and networking templates that I will share with all of you in Training Kit and in Slack that you can use to help you guide and craft your message. But make it your own. You might be limited in the number of characters that you can use on LinkedIn if you are connecting with somebody for the first time, so you might have to trim it down a little bit. If you get a warm intro through somebody you're already connected with, try to get an email address. That way you can go into a little bit more detail and you're not stuck with the short character limit on LinkedIn. So that is where you can start when you're researching companies and starting to build your network at the companies that you want to work at. And again, this will not be a super quick task as you go through your job search. This is something that you're going to want to devote time to on a regular basis. But by starting now and by setting small weekly goals around this, you're going to save yourself so much time in the long run. And you can also help Lambda School know what companies that we can target for you too. Because we have a partnerships team and they love hearing from students about what companies they want to work at. So if there's a place where you really want to work and you don't have a connection and you just cannot find somebody to help you get an introduction, that could be an awesome thing to share with the folks in the partnerships team at Lambda School, so we can see if we can make inroads on your behalf. So this is an excellent use of your time. It might feel like you're spinning your wheels a little bit at the beginning, but as you start to reach out to people and build your network at these companies, it'll feel really rewarding to know that you've spent time focusing on companies that you're actually interested in, you're passionate about what they do, or maybe you just know that they pay really well and have great benefits, and that's important to you. Either way, you're going to be a lot happier if you are working directly with companies in your job search that align with your values and your priorities. So take some time to start this process this week. If you've already started this process, great, continue doing it. This is something you should be doing on an ongoing basis throughout your time with Lambda School. So hopefully this was a helpful tutorial. I will be live in Slack this morning after this lesson answering any questions. So feel free to drop your questions in the questions thread there, and I will respond as soon as possible. And other than that, have a great week ahead, and look forward to hearing your questions and feedback on today's lesson. Take care, everyone.